Vampire King found his greatest enemy dying. Her only wish was hold my hand until the sun rises. The arrow protruding from her chest should have killed her instantly, but Elara Thorne had always been too stubborn to die on anyone's schedule but her own. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Lucien Corvus, Vampire King of the Northern Realms for 3 centuries, stood in the doorway of the crumbling chapel and stared at the woman who had devoted 20 years of her life to hunting him. Blood pooled beneath her in a dark halo, soaking into ancient stone floors that had witnessed 1,000 prayers and half as many deaths. The silver-tipped arrow, her own design, he noted with grim irony, had pierced between her ribs at an angle that suggested the work of someone who knew exactly where to aim for maximum suffering. She turned her head toward him with agonizing slowness, and her lips curled into something that might have been a smile if there had been any warmth left in her. Finally, she whispered, each word costing her, "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Who did this? The question emerged harsher than he intended, echoing off vaulted ceilings where plaster saints gazed down with blank indifference. Does it matter? Elara coughed, and blood flecked her lips. You should be celebrating. Your greatest enemy dying on holy ground. Isn't this what you've wanted? Lucien moved closer, despite every instinct warning him this could be a trap. They had fought across Europe for 2 decades, a deadly dance of blade and shadow, cunning and strength. She had killed 17 of his kind, destroyed 3 of his safe houses, and once came within a hair's breadth of staking him while he slept. He had left her with scars she would carry to her grave, which, he realized with uncomfortable certainty, would be coming far sooner than either of them had planned. "I wanted to face you in combat," he said, kneeling beside her. The smell of her blood was intoxicating and terrible, rich with life even as it ebbed away. Not watch you bleed out like a common criminal. Always so honorable. Another wet cough. That's why I could never truly hate you. The confession hung between them like smoke. Outside the chapel, rain began to fall, pattering against stained glass windows that depicted martyrdoms and miracles. Lucien studied the wound. The arrow had been deliberately placed to miss her heart, but pierce her lung. Whoever shot her wanted her to suffer. "The Council," Elara said, answering his unspoken question. "The Hunter's Council. They discovered what I—" She broke off, convulsing with pain. What?" Lucien demanded, but she had gone limp, consciousness fleeing. He made a decision that would have shocked both their peoples. Sliding one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, he lifted her against his chest. She weighed nothing, this warrior who had matched him blow for blow across a dozen battlefields. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel her heartbeat, weak, irregular, failing. The chapel doors burst open. 3 figures in the dark leathers of the Hunters Guild filled the entrance, crossbows raised. The leader, a man with a scar bisecting his face, smiled coldly. "Step away from the traitor, bloodsucker." "Traitor?" Lucien repeated, pieces clicking into place. "She refused her orders. Was supposed to deliver your head to the council last month. Instead, she's been—" The hunter's smile turned cruel. "Well, we suspected she'd been compromised. Didn't think she'd turn weak for a monster. Ilara stirred in his arms, her eyes opening to slits. "Marcus," she breathed, "I should have known." "You're a disgrace to everything we stand for," Marcus spat, "falling for the very thing you were sworn to destroy." "I haven't fallen for anyone," Ilara said, but the words lacked conviction. I learned that things aren't as simple." Silence. Marcus raised his crossbow. "We'll finish what we started, and then we'll mount both your heads on the council walls." Lucian's eyes flashed crimson. In 3 centuries, he had learned to control the beast within, to rule rather than be ruled by bloodlust. But watching these men threaten a dying woman, even his enemy, ignited something primal. He moved with speed that made him a blur, depositing Ilara behind the altar and positioning himself between her and the hunters. "You want her? Come take her." The fight was brief and brutal. Lucian's age and power made him nearly unstoppable in close quarters, but the hunters were well trained and knew his weaknesses. Holy water seared his skin. Silver blades opened shallow wounds that burned like fire. He killed 2 of them before Marcus landed a solid blow to his ribs, the silver-edged blade sliding between armor plates he hadn't bothered to wear. Lucian staggered, and Marcus pressed his advantage, backing him against a pillar. "You're weakening, King. Maybe the legends of your power were always exaggerated." "Marcus!" Ilara's voice cracked across the chapel like a whip. She had dragged herself upright against the altar, her own crossbow, somehow retrieved despite her injuries, aimed steadily at her former comrade. "Walk away." "You can't even stand," Marcus laughed. "You think I'm afraid?" The bolt took him through the throat. He dropped without another word, blood spreading across ancient stone. Ilara lowered the crossbow and collapsed. Lucian caught her before she hit the ground, both of them now bleeding, both now hunted. "That was foolish," he said softly. "You've made yourself an enemy of your own people. I've been questioning my people for 2 years now." She looked up at him, her face pale as moonlight. "Ever since Prague, when you spared those children, when you could have killed them to cover your escape, but you didn't. I started watching you differently after that." Prague, Lucian remembered. A hunter ambush, a family caught in the crossfire. He had hidden the children in a cellar and taken a silver bolt to the shoulder to lead the hunters away. "You were there?" "On the rooftop. I had a clear shot at your back." Her laugh was bitter and broken. "I couldn't take it. Couldn't stop asking myself what kind of monster saves children. And once I started asking questions," she coughed, and more blood came. "I saw too much. The council's corruption. The innocents we killed because they got in the way. We've become the very thing we claimed to fight." "So they declared you a traitor." "And sent Marcus to execute me. He always did enjoy the wet work." She shivered despite the warmth of his arms. "I suppose this is justice. I've killed so many of your kind. Isn't this fitting?" "Nothing about this is fitting." Lucian carried her to a stone bench, assessing her wound with clinical precision. The arrow had to come out, but doing so would likely kill her. Leaving it in would only prolong the inevitable. "I have a request," Ilara said quietly. "My only wish, really." "Name it." "Hold my hand until the sun rises." She met his eyes, and in hers he saw acceptance, exhaustion, and something else, a yearning for companionship in her final hours. "I don't want to die alone, and you're the only one who would understand what I've been fighting for." Lucian stared at her. "You want me, your enemy, to comfort you as you die? You're not my enemy. Not anymore. Maybe you never really were." She reached for his hand, her fingers cold and trembling. We've been pawns in someone else's game, both of us. I see that now. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. He should refuse. Should leave her to her fate and return to his kingdom, where the Council of Vampire Lords was already questioning his leadership, his mercy, his reluctance to wage all-out war against the hunters. Staying here, spending the night with a dying hunter, would only add fuel to the accusations that he had grown weak. But looking at Ilara Thorn, legendary hunter, fierce warrior, stubborn idealist, he found he couldn't walk away. "The sun won't rise for 6 hours," he said, taking her hand. "Then we have 6 hours," she smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it reached her eyes. "Tell me something true about you, something you've never told anyone." And so, as rain drummed against ancient glass and candles flickered in the drafts, Lucien began to speak. He told her about his human life, centuries past, when he had been a physician's apprentice in a village whose name had been forgotten by history. How he had tried to save his younger sister from plague, working day and night to find a cure, until the vampire who ruled their region offered him a choice: watch her die, or accept the dark gift and gain the power to save her. "I took it," Lucien said, his thumb unconsciously stroking the back of Ilara's hand. "I became what I am, and I saved her. For 3 months she lived. Then winter came, harsh and bitter, and she caught fever. I had power over death, but none over disease. She died anyway." "I'm sorry," Ilara whispered. "I buried her in frozen ground and swore I would use this curse to protect others, that I wouldn't let my transformation be meaningless." He laughed without humor. 3 centuries later, and I'm king of a people who mostly see humans as cattle. I've failed her memory every day I wear this crown." "No." Ilara squeezed his hand with what little strength remained. "You've held on to your humanity when everything tried to strip it away. That's not failure. That's the hardest victory there is." They sat in silence, and Lucien found himself studying her as he never had during their battles. She was beautiful in a way he'd never let himself acknowledge. Sharp features that spoke of determination, eyes that had seen too much suffering, hair that caught the candlelight like dark fire. But more than physical beauty, there was a quality to her, a fierce integrity that had made her question her own people's righteousness. "Your turn," he said. "Tell me something true." Ilara's eyes drifted to the vaulted ceiling. "I was orphaned at 8. Vampires attacked our village, a rogue pack, not under your authority, but I didn't know that then. They killed my parents and 40 others. The hunters found me hiding in a root cellar and took me in, raised me to be a weapon. I'm sorry, truly." "Don't be, not for that." She turned her gaze back to him. "Be sorry for what came after. They trained me so well, made me so certain of my righteousness, that I killed without question. Until Prague, until I saw you choose mercy when cruelty would have been easier." She coughed, and the blood was darker now. "Do you know how terrifying it is to have your entire worldview shattered in a single moment? Better than you might think." "I suppose you would." She smiled weakly. "We're quite the pair, aren't we? 2 warriors who discovered too late that they've been fighting the wrong war." An hour passed, then 2. Ilara grew weaker, her breathing more labored. Lucien adjusted his position to support her more comfortably, and she leaned against him as though they had done this 1,000 times before, instead of being mortal enemies turned reluctant allies. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice was barely audible now. "Anything. Did you ever wonder? About us, I mean. In another life, if circumstances had been different?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he admitted. "More than I should have." "Every time we fought, every time you nearly killed me or I nearly killed you, I wondered what you would be like as an ally instead of an enemy. what we could accomplish together if we weren't bound by the hatred of our peoples. I'm glad I'm not the only one. She closed her eyes. I used to dream about it sometimes, after Prague. Stupid dreams where we met differently, where there was no blood between us, where you could walk in daylight and I wasn't trained to kill you on sight. Not stupid, Lucian said quietly. I had similar dreams. Outside, the rain intensified. The chapel felt isolated from the world, a pocket of stillness where two warriors could set down their weapons and simply be human, or as human as either of them could manage. Tell me about your kingdom, Alara said. I've heard rumors, but I want the truth. Are your people really so different from the rogues who killed my parents? Some are, some aren't. Lucian chose his words carefully. I've tried to establish laws, create structure. My kingdom doesn't allow the hunting of humans for sport. We have agreements with certain villages, protection in exchange for willing blood donors. It's not perfect. There are those who chafe under my rules, who see me as weak for not allowing them to take what they want. Hence the council questioning your leadership. You've been keeping track? I'm a hunter. Was a hunter. She corrected herself with a sad smile. Research was part of the job. I know about the faction that wants to depose you, about the young vampires who think you're too soft on humans, about the challenges to your authority. If they succeed in removing me, the war between our peoples will intensify. Whoever takes my throne won't share my restraint. Then you can't let them succeed. Alara turned to look at him fully. Promise me something. What? Don't give up. Don't let my death or the council's betrayal or any of it make you cynical. Keep fighting for what you believe in. She gripped his hand tighter. Someone has to remember that there's more to this conflict than endless bloodshed. I promise, Lucian said, and meant it. They fell into a comfortable silence. Alara's breathing grew shallower, her skin colder despite his attempts to keep her warm. Lucian found himself memorizing her face, the curve of her jaw, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a fight years ago that he suddenly remembered giving her. Lucian? Her voice was fading. I'm here. The sun. Is it close? He glanced toward the windows, seeing the first hints of gray in the darkness. An hour, maybe less. Good, she smiled. I'm tired, so tired. But I needed to last until dawn, to know I kept my promise to stay with you through the night. You've more than kept it. Lucian brushed a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so tender it surprised him. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. What's that? Hope. That perhaps not all the fighting has been in vain. That maybe our peoples can find another way. Build that world for me, Alara whispered. Build it for both of us, for all the warriors on both sides who never wanted this war. I will. Her eyes were closing now, the spark in them dimming. Lucian held her closer, feeling her heartbeat falter. One more thing, she breathed. Yes. In those dreams I mentioned, the ones where we met differently. Her voice was barely a whisper now. We were happy. I thought you should know that. Something in Lucian's chest, something he thought had died 3 centuries ago, cracked and bled. In my dreams, too, he said roughly. We were very happy. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Then, perhaps in another life. In another life, he agreed, his own voice breaking. The gray light grew stronger. Alara's hand went slack in his. Her breathing stopped, and in the moment between darkness and dawn, she died. Lucian sat with her as the sun rose, his body screaming in protest as light began to stream through the stained glass windows. But he had made a promise, and promises were all they had left. He held her hand as dawn painted the chapel in colors of crimson and gold, as the light grew painful, then excruciating. Only when the sun was fully above the horizon, when he had kept every word of his vow, did he finally let go. The journey back to his fortress was agony. Lucian traveled through the sewers and catacombs beneath the city, avoiding sunlight but unable to escape the burns that covered half his body. His skin felt like it was still aflame, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through his system. He had survived 3 centuries of conflict, but sitting with Elara as dawn broke had come closer to destroying him than any battle. Worth it, he thought, stumbling through ancient stone passages. Every moment was worth it. He emerged in the fortress cellars as evening fell, collapsing against cold stone walls as his regenerative abilities slowly began their work. 2 of his most trusted guards found him there, Dimitri, who had served him for a century, and Elena, a younger vampire who had been turned during the plague years. "My lord!" Elena rushed forward, her eyes wide with horror at his condition. "What happened? We heard you went to the old chapel, but—" "I kept a promise," Lucian said through gritted teeth. "Help me to my chambers, and send word to the council that I require 3 days before I answer their questions." Dimitri exchanged a glance with Elena. "My lord, the council is impatient. Lord Constantine has been spreading rumors that you've been compromised, that you've betrayed our people." 3 days, Lucian repeated, his voice hard despite his weakness. "They can wait that long, or they can try to take my throne. Tell them I said so." The guards helped him through the fortress corridors, past tapestries and paintings that depicted centuries of vampire history. Some showed battles, others depicted the founding of his kingdom, still others captured moments of dark beauty, moonlit hunts, eternal feasts, the romance of immortality that poets loved to write about and rarely captured truly. His chambers were in the eastern tower, far from windows that would let in morning light. The room was furnished simply despite his status: a large bed with dark curtains, shelves of books accumulated over centuries, a desk covered in maps and correspondence. On one wall hung a painting of the sister he'd failed to save, forever young in oil and canvas. "Forgive me, Anna," he whispered, as he always did when he looked at her portrait. "I'm still trying to make it right." Elena helped him to the bed while Dimitri fetched blood, fresh from willing donors in the villages that had sworn fealty to Lucian's protection. As Lucian drank, feeling strength slowly return, Dimitri cleared his throat. "My lord, if I may ask, what promise did you keep?" Lucian set down the crystal goblet. "I sat with Elara Thorn as she died. I held her hand until sunrise, as she requested." Silence. Then Elena gasped. "The hunter? The one who nearly killed you in Amsterdam?" "The same." "But why would you?" Dimitri stopped himself. "Forgive me, it's not my place to question." "No, ask. You've earned the right." Lucian leaned back against pillows, feeling his burns beginning to heal, skin knitting itself slowly back together. "She died questioning everything she'd been taught, just as I've been questioning what we've become. In her final hours, we spoke honestly. No weapons, no pretense, just 2 warriors acknowledging that perhaps we've been fighting the wrong war." Elena sat carefully on the edge of the bed, her young face troubled. "Lord Constantine says you've grown soft, that you care too much about humans and not enough about our kind." "Constantine is a fool who mistakes cruelty for strength," Lucian said bluntly. "And he represents the faction that will destroy us all if they gain power. They want unrestricted hunting, open warfare, a return to the old ways when we were feared and hated and constantly under siege from hunter armies." "But we won those wars," Dimitri pointed out. "Did we? We survived them. That's different than winning." Lucian closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. Ilara showed me something in her final hours. She showed me what we've lost by perpetuating this endless conflict. And she died hoping I would build something better. Can you? Elena asked quietly. Build something better, I mean, with the council divided and the hunters declaring open war? I don't know, Lucian admitted, but I'm going to try. Because if I don't, her death and the deaths of thousands like her will have meant nothing. The next 3 days passed in a haze of healing and preparation. Lucian spent hours poring over Ilara's journal, reading her observations, her doubts, her gradual awakening to the corruption within her own organization. He also studied reports from his spies in the Hunters Guild, piecing together the political landscape he would need to navigate. On the 3rd evening, he called his council to the Great Hall. The chamber was imposing, vaulted ceilings, supported by columns carved with protective runes, walls hung with battle standards from centuries past, a long table of dark wood polished to mirror brightness. 13 seats surrounded the table, one for each of the vampire lords who advised him. Not all of them were his friends. Lord Constantine was first to arrive, as always. He was an ancient vampire, older even than Lucian, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He had opposed Lucian's policies for decades, arguing for a return to the old ways. Lucian, he said, deliberately omitting Lucian's title. I'm pleased to see you've incident. My vigil, Lucian corrected calmly, taking his place at the head of the table. I kept a promise to a dying warrior. A dying hunter, Constantine sneered. Our enemy. You sat in sunlight for her? Have you lost your mind? Other council members began to arrive. Lady Katerina, who ruled the Eastern Territories with pragmatic wisdom. Lord Ashford, who had been Lucian's ally for 2 centuries. Lady Morgana, whose loyalties shifted with political winds. Young Lord Vincent, barely a century old, but already powerful. Others filed in, each representing different factions, different philosophies. When all were seated, Lucian began. 3 weeks ago, I found Ilara Thorne dying in a chapel outside the city. She had been shot with a silver arrow by her own people, executed for refusing to kill me on the Hunter Council's orders. Murmurs rippled around the table. Even Constantine looked surprised. She asked one thing of me in her final hours, Lucian continued, to hold her hand until sunrise, to ensure she didn't die alone. I honored that request. Why? Lord Vincent asked, genuinely curious. She was our enemy. She'd killed 17 of our kind. Because in her final hours, she was simply a warrior who had fought for what she believed in, and died questioning whether it was right. Because she showed me that there are others, on both sides, who are tired of this endless war. Lucian pulled out Ilara's journal and set it on the table. She kept records. Evidence of corruption within the Hunters Guild. Proof that their council has been deliberately escalating conflicts to maintain their power and profit. He let that sink in. What are you proposing? Lady Katerina asked shrewdly. That we use this information. That we reach out to the faction of hunters who aren't controlled by their corrupt council. That we build a treaty. Not surrender, not victory, but a genuine framework for coexistence. The room erupted. Half the council shouted their support, half their opposition. Constantine's voice rose above the chaos. This is madness. We are superior beings. Why should we negotiate with cattle? Lucian's fist hit the table hard enough to crack the wood, silence falling instantly. Because I am tired, he said, his voice carrying centuries of weariness, of watching our people die in a war that serves no one but those who profit from it. Because I am tired of younglings being taught that cruelty is strength. Because I remember being human, and I remember that we were not so different from them. "You've been compromised," Constantine declared, "by your feelings for that hunter." "I had no feelings for Elara Thorne beyond respect for a worthy opponent," Lucian said coldly. "But I respected her enough to listen when she spoke truth. Can you say you've done the same? When was the last time any of you questioned whether this war is truly necessary?" Lord Ashford leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Lucian? Specifics." "A meeting with moderate elements in the Hunters Guild, under flag of truce, in neutral territory. We share what we know about their council's corruption. We propose rules of engagement that protect civilians on both sides. We start small, designated territories, mixed patrols to deal with rogues. We build trust gradually." "And if it fails?" Lady Morgana asked. "Then we're no worse off than we are now. But if it succeeds..." Lucian met each council member's eyes in turn. "If it succeeds, we build a world where our people don't have to hide in shadows, where we're not constantly at war, where we can exist openly, peacefully, with humans who understand we're not monsters." The debate raged for hours. Constantine and his faction argued vehemently against any treaty. Lord Ashford and Lady Katarina saw the strategic wisdom. Young Lord Vincent surprised everyone by speaking passionately about the cost of war on younger vampires, who knew only conflict and never peace. Finally, Lucian called for a vote. "All in favor of authorizing me to reach out to the Hunters Guild." 8 hands rose, 5 remained down. "The motion carries," Lucian said. To Constantine, he added, "You're free to oppose this policy, but if you actively undermine it, I will consider it treason. Am I clear?" Constantine's eyes glittered with barely suppressed rage. "Clear, my king." The title was mocking, but Lucian let it pass. He had won this battle. The war within his own council was far from over. The weeks that followed were chaos, but Lucian had made a promise to a dying woman, and he intended to keep it. He began by cleaning house within his own ranks. The vampires who had been plotting against him found themselves facing their king at his most dangerous. Not the merciful ruler they had mistaken for weak, but the ancient warrior who had survived 3 centuries of conflict. 2 challenges to his authority were answered with decisive violence. The message was clear. Mercy was not weakness, but there were limits to his patience. He began by cleaning house within his own ranks. The vampires who had been plotting against him found themselves facing their king at his most dangerous. Not the merciful ruler they had mistaken for weak, but the ancient warrior who had survived 3 centuries of conflict. The first challenge came from a young vampire named Severin, barely 50 years old and full of misplaced confidence. He issued the formal challenge in the Great Hall before the full council and assembled court. "Lucian Corvus," Severin declared, "I name you unfit to rule. You've grown weak, compromised by human sentiment. I challenge you for leadership of the Northern Realms." Lucian regarded the young vampire with something approaching pity. "Do you understand what you're asking for, Severin? I ask for the right to lead our people, without cowardice, without..." He never finished the sentence. Lucian moved with speed that made him invisible, crossing 30 feet in less than a heartbeat. His hand closed around Severin's throat, lifting him off the ground. "I have walked this earth for 300 years, Lucian said softly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have fought in wars you cannot imagine. I have killed armies. I have seen empires rise and fall. And you child, dare to call me weak?" Severin struggled, but he was like a mouse in the grip of a lion. Around the hall, other vampires watched with rapt attention. This was the reminder they needed, that mercy was a choice Lucian made, not a limitation of his power. I could crush your throat, Lucian continued. I could tear you apart so thoroughly that even vampire regeneration couldn't save you. But I won't. Do you know why? Severin managed to shake his head. Because Ilara Thorn taught me something in her final hours. She taught me that being strong enough to show mercy is harder than being strong enough to kill. Lucian released him, letting him drop to the floor. You're exiled, Severin. Take your followers and leave my territory. If you return, I won't be merciful again. The second challenge came from within the council itself. Lord Constantine, emboldened by Severin's attempt, made his move during a late-night session when only 6 council members were present. Lucian has forgotten what we are, Constantine said, standing dramatically. He mourns a human hunter. He wants to negotiate with our prey. This is not leadership, it's betrayal of our nature. Our nature, Lucian repeated flatly. Tell me, Constantine, what is our nature? To be mindless beasts who drink and kill? Is that all you think we are? We are predators, Constantine slammed his fist on the table. We are meant to rule over humans, not coexist with them. We are what we choose to be. Lucian stood, and his presence filled the room like a physical force. I choose to be more than a predator. I choose to remember my humanity and honor it. If that makes me unfit to rule in your eyes, then challenge me properly. Issue the formal words. Put your power where your mouth is. Constantine's confidence wavered. That's not necessary. You called me unfit. You questioned my right to rule. Those are the words of challenge, whether you're brave enough to follow through or not. Lucian's smile was cold. So choose. Fight me now and prove your strength, or bend your knee and acknowledge my authority. The room held its breath. Constantine was old, powerful, and skilled, but Lucian was a king, and kings didn't hold power through age alone. Constantine looked around at the other council members, finding no support in their faces. I spoke in anger, my lord. I acknowledge your authority. Then sit down and be silent, or leave this council permanently. Constantine sat, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Lucian knew he'd made an enemy for life, but he'd also made it clear that there were limits to dissent. The message spread quickly through vampire society. The king was not weak, and those who mistook mercy for vulnerability would learn otherwise. With his own house somewhat in order, Lucian turned his attention to the seemingly impossible task of reaching out to the Hunters Guild. The letter he sent was simple, but crafting it took hours. To the field commanders of the Hunters Guild. I hold Ilara Thorn's final testimony, including her observations about corruption within your council and her reasons for refusing to assassinate me. If you want to understand why she died and what she died believing, meet me under flag of truce. I propose we honor her memory by at least attempting to build the world she hoped to see. Lucian Corvus, King of the Northern Realms. Location: the old monastery of St. Cadmus, neutral ground. Date: 20 days from today. Conditions: no more than 6 representatives per side. All weapons declared but carried. If you attempt treachery, you'll find I can kill all of you before you draw your second breath. Come in good faith or don't come at all. He sent the letter through 3 different channels, unsure if any would reach sympathetic ears or if all would be intercepted by the corrupt council Ilara had written about. 18 days passed with no response. Lucian began to think the attempt had failed, that the Hunters Guild was too fractured or too controlled to respond. Then, on the 19th day, a reply arrived, delivered by a young hunter who looked terrified to be standing in a vampire fortress. The letter was terse. "We'll be there. If this is a trap, we'll make sure your name becomes a curse for 1,000 years. If it's genuine, we'll talk. Come alone or with your most trusted. We'll do the same. Commander Sienna Blackwood." Lucian recognized the name from Ilara's journal. Blackwood had been her mentor, the woman who had trained her as a child. If anyone would honor Ilara's memory, it would be her. The old monastery of St. Cadmus sat in a valley between territories, abandoned for 2 centuries after both vampires and hunters had fought a bloody battle within its walls. Neither side could claim it without breaking ancient treaties, so it had become neutral ground by default, a ruin where ghosts of old conflicts seemed to linger in the stones. Lucian arrived with 5 companions: Dimitri and Elena, who had earned his complete trust; Lord Ashford, whose diplomatic skills might prove valuable; Lady Katerina, who was respected even by their enemies; and, surprisingly, young Lord Vincent, who had asked to come specifically because he wanted to see if peace was possible. "I've never known anything but war," Vincent had said. "I'd like to see what the alternative looks like." They arrived an hour before sunset, while the sun was still too high for comfort, but low enough that Lucian could function. The monastery's great hall was partially collapsed, open to the sky in places, with bird nests in the rafters and grass growing through broken floor stones. The hunters arrived precisely at sunset, as promised. 6 figures in dark leather, armed but with weapons sheathed. At their head was a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair pulled back severely, scars on her face and hands that spoke of decades of combat. Commander Sienna Blackwood. Behind her came 5 others, 3 men and 2 women, all bearing themselves like experienced warriors. For a long moment, the 2 groups simply stared at each other across 10 feet of ancient stone. The weight of centuries of conflict hung heavy in the air. Finally, Blackwood spoke. "Lucian Corvus, I've wanted to meet you for 20 years, preferably with a stake in my hand." "Commander Blackwood, Ilara spoke of you in her final hours. She said you were the one who taught her to question orders that felt wrong." Blackwood's expression flickered with pain. "Did she die well?" "She died courageously, questioning everything she'd been taught, hoping for something better." Lucian pulled out Ilara's journal. "She kept this. 2 years of observations about the corruption in your council. She died rather than kill me on their orders." "We know." Blackwood's voice was rough. "After she died, we started investigating. What we found?" She shook her head. "I've served the guild for 35 years. I believed we were righteous, that we protected humanity from monsters. But the real monsters were sitting in the council chambers, using our loyalty to line their pockets and settle political scores." One of the other hunters, a scarred man, spoke up. "My sister was killed 2 years ago. We were told it was a vampire ambush. But according to records we found, records the council tried to destroy, she was sent into a trap deliberately. She'd been asking questions about missing funds." "How many others?" Lady Katerina asked quietly. "At least 15 that we can prove," another hunter said, a woman with steel-gray eyes. "Probably more. Hunters who questioned orders, who noticed irregularities, who saw things they weren't supposed to see. The council eliminated them and blamed vampires." While simultaneously, Lucian said, "My own council was advocating for more aggressive expansion into human territories. 2 corrupt leaderships feeding off each other's actions to justify their power." Blackwood studied him intently. Ilara wrote about Prague in her journal, about you saving those children. She wrote that it was the moment she started questioning everything. I remember Prague. Lucian met her eyes. I remember having a clear escape route and choosing instead to draw fire away from a family who had nothing to do with our war. I took a silver bolt to the shoulder for my mercy. Some of my counsel called it weakness. Was it? I don't know. But I know that every time I chose cruelty when mercy was possible, I lost a piece of myself. After 3 centuries, I've lost enough pieces. I'd like to start getting them back. Vincent stepped forward, and Lucian noted with approval that the young vampire's voice was steady despite his nervousness. I'm barely a century old. I've never known peace with humans. Everything I've been taught says you're animals to be hunted or cattle to be kept. But Lord Lucian says there's another way. I came here because I want to see if that's true. One of the younger hunters, a woman perhaps in her 30s, responded, I was turned into a hunter at 15 after vampires killed my family. I've spent 20 years learning to hate your kind. But if you're not monsters, if you're people who can choose differently, then maybe I've been wrong about some things. The ice was breaking. Slowly, carefully, but breaking nonetheless. Lord Ashford pulled out maps and documents. We've been planning this for weeks. A framework for coexistence. It starts with designated territories, places where humans and vampires agree not to hunt each other. Mixed enforcement teams to deal with rogues on both sides who won't accept the new order. Eventually, integrated villages where both peoples can live peacefully. You're talking about revolution, Blackwood said. We're talking about evolution, Lady Katerina corrected, about both our peoples growing beyond hatred and fear. They talked for hours. Not everything was agreed upon. There were heated arguments about territory boundaries, about punishment for past crimes, about how to handle the inevitable resistance from extremists on both sides. But slowly, impossibly, a framework began to emerge. As the moon rose high, Blackwood called a pause. We need to take this to our people. Not the council, we don't trust them anymore, but the field commanders, the ones who actually do the fighting. If we can get half of them to agree, we'll have enough force to implement this, even if the council tries to stop us. The same is true on our side, Lucian acknowledged. Not all vampire lords will accept this. Some will see it as betrayal of our nature. Then we'll deal with them. Blackwood's voice was hard. I'm tired of fighting the wrong war. If my own people try to stop this, I'll fight them instead. Before they parted, Blackwood approached Lucian privately. One more thing. Ilara's personal effects. We found something we thought you should have. She handed him the journal, the same one he'd seen before. But there were pages he hadn't read. Personal pages where Ilara had written not as a hunter, but as a woman. I dream about him sometimes, about Lucian Corvus. Not as an enemy, but what? A friend? An ally? Something more? I'm not sure. I know it's foolish, dangerous even. We're on opposite sides of an endless war. But I can't stop wondering what he would be like if we'd met differently, if I'd seen his kindness before I learned to hate his kind. Sometimes I think about Prague, about how he saved those children at cost to himself, how he looked at them with something like grief, like he was remembering his own humanity. I saw something in him that day that I can't unsee. Is it possible to respect your enemy so much that they stop being your enemy? Is it treason to wonder if we've been wrong about everything we thought we knew? There were more entries like that, scattered over months, dreams of different circumstances, observations about Lucian's mercy, questions about the nature of their conflict. Lucian closed the journal carefully, his throat tight. She never said any of this during our final conversation. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe you both understood without saying it. Blackwood's expression was softer now. She was the best of us, Lucian Corvus, the very best. Make sure her death meant something. I promise, Lucian said. I swear on every year of my existence, I will build the world she hoped to see. 2 months after that first meeting in the monastery, the treaty was ready for implementation. Not perfect, not comprehensive, but a beginning. As dawn approached and Lucian prepared to leave, Blackwood stopped him. One more thing. Ilara's personal effects. We found something we think she would have wanted you to have. She handed him a small journal, leather-bound and worn. Lucian opened it and saw Ilara's handwriting, neat and precise, filling page after page with observations, doubts, realizations. On the final page, dated the day before her death, was a single entry. I've decided to refuse the Council's order to assassinate Lucian Corvus. They'll call me a traitor. They may kill me for it, but I've seen enough to know that he's not the enemy. The war itself is. If I die for refusing to kill a man who's trying to make things better, at least I'll die with my integrity intact. Maybe that's the best any warrior can hope for. Below it, in a different hand, was a note from Blackwood. She was the best of us. Make sure her death meant something. Lucian closed the journal carefully. I promise, he said, though Blackwood was already walking away. 2 months after that first meeting in the monastery, the treaty was ready for implementation. It wasn't perfect. Both sides had made compromises that left some unsatisfied, but it was a beginning. The first formal agreement between vampires and hunters in 3 centuries of conflict. The signing took place in the same monastery where they'd first met, now cleaned and partially restored as a symbol of renewal. Representatives from both sides gathered, though notably, neither the Hunters' Council nor several vampire lords were present. Those who opposed the treaty had made their positions clear. They would not participate in what they saw as betrayal. Lucian signed first, his signature bold and clear. Commander Blackwood signed next. Then the other representatives added their names, vampire lords and field commanders, each signature an act of faith and courage. This doesn't end the conflict, Blackwood said as she set down her pen. You know that, right? There will be resistance. Extremists on both sides will see this as weakness. I know, Lucian agreed. But we're not trying to end the conflict overnight. We're trying to give it a different direction, to create alternatives to endless bloodshed. Then let's start creating. The first integrated village was established in a valley on the border between vampire and human territories. The settlement had been abandoned during the war years, a victim of a brutal battle that left it in ruins. Now it would be rebuilt as something new. They called it Dawn's Hope, a name that made Lucian smile sadly every time he heard it. Ilara would have appreciated the symbolism. 30 families volunteered to be part of the experiment, 15 human, 15 vampire. They would live together, governed by joint councils, protected by mixed patrols. It was unprecedented, dangerous, and absolutely necessary if the treaty was going to be more than words on paper. Lucian visited Dawn's Hope on the first night of occupation. The settlement was still mostly ruins, with only a few buildings restored enough to be habitable. Families were moving in by torchlight, humans and vampires eyeing each other with equal parts curiosity and suspicion. He found Dimitri supervising the vampire families, ensuring they understood the strict rules. No unauthorized feeding, no using supernatural abilities to intimidate, no treating humans as inferior. Dimitri looked exhausted but determined. "How was it going?" Lucian asked. "Better than expected, honestly. Most of the vampires here volunteered because they're tired of the conflict. They want to try something different. Dmitri gestured to a young vampire couple helping a human family lift furniture. That's Marcus and Sonia. They lost their daughter in a hunter raid 5 years ago. They said if this experiment could prevent other parents from losing children, they wanted to be part of it. Lucian felt a swell of gratitude for his people, the ones who had chosen hope over hatred. He crossed to where Commander Blackwood was organizing the human families. She looked equally exhausted, directing workers and mediating disputes with practiced efficiency. "Any problems?" Lucian asked. "A few families are nervous. That's understandable. They've been taught to fear vampires their whole lives, but most are committed. They've seen the cost of war up close and want something different for their children." She pointed to an older man talking with one of the vampire lords. "That's Gerald Thorne, Ilara's uncle." Lucian froze. She had family? A few distant relatives. Gerald was like a father to her after her parents died. He volunteered for this settlement specifically because he wanted to honor her memory. Lucian approached the old man, who turned to face him with eyes that were familiar, the same gray-green that Ilaris had been. "You're Lucian Corvus?" Gerald said. It wasn't a question. "I am. You were with her when she died." "I was. She asked me to hold her hand until sunrise." "I did." Gerald studied him for a long moment. "Was she in pain?" "Some, but she was brave. She died hoping that her death would mean something, that it would help build this." Lucian gestured to the settlement around them. "Then I'm glad I'm here. If this place succeeds, if humans and vampires can actually live together peacefully, then my Ilara's death will have mattered." Gerald's voice cracked. "She was all I had left of my family. I just want her sacrifice to mean something." "It will," Lucian promised. "I swear to you, it will." Over the following weeks, Dawn's hope slowly transformed from a ruin into a functioning community. It wasn't easy. There were incidents, a vampire who lost control and nearly bit a child before being restrained by his own kind, a human who tried to poison a vampire's blood supply before being caught by other humans. Both perpetrators were tried by joint tribunal and exiled. But there were also moments of unexpected grace. A human doctor who agreed to treat vampires injured by silver, learning as she went how to work with their unique physiology. A vampire scholar who began teaching human children to read, discovering a love for education he had not known he possessed. Families from both species sharing meals, sharing stories, learning that their supposed enemies were simply people with different needs and different fears. Lucian visited every week, monitoring progress and dealing with problems as they arose. On one visit, he found young Lord Vincent teaching a group of human children about vampire history. "And so my grandfather fought in the Battle of Dark Moon Pass," Vincent was saying to a dozen rapt children. "But what they don't tell you in the history books is that he was fighting beside a human army, not against one. There was a demon cult trying to open a portal, and vampires and humans fought together to stop them." A little girl raised her hand. "If vampires and humans fought together before, why do you fight each other now?" Vincent looked at Lucian, who had entered quietly. Lucian stepped forward. "Because we forgot," he said simply. "We forgot that we used to be allies. We forgot that we both want the same things: safety for our families, peace in our homes, a future for our children. We let fear and anger make us forget that we're not so different." "My daddy says vampires are monsters," a boy said. "Some vampires are," Lucian acknowledged, "just like some humans are. But most of us are just people trying to live our lives. Your daddy has been taught to fear us, just like I was taught to see humans as cattle. We were both wrong. Are you going to teach my daddy to not be scared?" Lucian smiled sadly. "I'm going to try. That's what this place is for, to show people that we don't have to be enemies." 3 months into the experiment, the first wedding took place in Dawn's Hope. a human man and a vampire woman who had met during the rebuilding and fallen in love. Their union was controversial. Many on both sides saw it as inappropriate or even treasonous. But they stood before their mixed community and exchanged vows that spoke of hope and unity. Lucien attended, as did Commander Blackwood. They stood together at the back of the restored chapel, watching as two people celebrated together for perhaps the first time in centuries. "This is what she wanted to see," Blackwood said quietly. "This exact thing. Ilara believed that if humans and vampires could just talk to each other, see each other as individuals instead of enemies, everything would change." She was right. She usually was. But success bred resistance. As Dawn's Hope thrived, those who opposed the treaty grew more vocal and more violent. The first major attack came on a supply convoy heading to the settlement. Masked hunters, not official guild members, but extremists who rejected the treaty, ambushed the wagons, killing 3 vampire guards and 2 human drivers. The message was clear. Cooperation would not be tolerated. Lucien's response was swift and brutal. He tracked the attackers personally, bringing Lady Katarina and a team of enforcers. They found the extremist cell hiding in a cave system, planning their next attack. "You're under arrest for violation of treaty terms," Lucien announced. The leader, a hunter in his 30s with wild eyes, laughed. "We don't recognize your treaty. Vampires are abominations. They should be destroyed, not embraced. Then you'll face justice according to treaty law. Joint tribunal, fair trial, sentence determined by representatives from both sides." "We'll face no vampire justice," the hunter raised his crossbow. He died before he could fire, Lady Katarina moving with vampiric speed to break his neck. The other extremists were captured and brought before the tribunal. 3 humans and 3 vampires who judged them according to the new laws. The verdict was exile for those who had only participated in the planning, execution for those who had actually killed. It was harsh but necessary, a message that the treaty would be enforced by both sides. A similar incident occurred on the vampire side. Lord Constantine, who had opposed Lucien from the beginning, organized a group of young vampires to raid a human village that had signed on to the treaty. They killed 7 people before Lucien's enforcers arrived. This time, Lucien handled it personally. He faced Constantine in the Great Hall before the full council. "You violated sacred treaty terms," Lucien said coldly. "You killed innocents under my protection." "They were cattle," Constantine spat. "Prey. I was showing our people what they've lost by following your weak leadership. You were showing them what we gain by rejecting your kind of leadership. Guards, take him." Constantine fought, and it was brutal. He was ancient and powerful, nearly Lucien's equal in raw strength. They battled across the Great Hall, destroying furniture, cracking stone pillars, moving with speed that made them invisible to younger vampires. In the end, Lucien won, not through superior strength, but through superior will. He had more to fight for, more reason to win. He pinned Constantine against a shattered pillar, silver blade at his throat. "I could kill you," Lucien said. "By our old laws, I have every right." "Then do it," Constantine snarled. "Prove you're still capable of strength." "No. You'll face the joint tribunal, just like the human extremists did. You'll be judged by both our peoples, and you'll face whatever sentence they decree. That's what justice looks like in this new world." The tribunal convicted Constantine of murder and treaty violation. The sentence was death by sunrise, a punishment that horrified many vampires but satisfied the human representatives. Lucien attended the execution, watching as the vampire who had opposed him for so long faced the sun he'd spent centuries avoiding. "May you find peace in whatever comes next," Lucian said quietly as dawn broke. Constantine burned without screaming, his final act of defiance being to die with dignity. 1 year after the treaty signing, Dawn's hope had grown from 30 families to nearly 200. Lucian stood in the chapel where Alara had died, now restored and serving as a memorial to fallen warriors from both sides. Her name was carved in the stone, along with hundreds of others who had died in the long conflict. Commander Blackwood joined him, her hair grayer now, her shoulders bent with the weight of leadership and grief. "We're dedicating the new training facility next week. We're calling it the Thorn Academy." She would have hated that, Lucian said with a slight smile. Probably, but she earned it. Blackwood studied the memorial wall. Do you ever wonder if she knew? If she understood what her choice would set in motion? "I think she hoped," Lucian said quietly. "I think she died hoping that her death wouldn't be in vain, that 2 warriors from opposite sides spending 1 night talking honestly might plant a seed. Some seed. It became a forest." They stood in comfortable silence. Over 2 years of working together had created a genuine respect between them, even friendship. Blackwood had become one of his most trusted advisors, and Lucian had stood beside her as they dismantled the corruption in her organization. "I still miss her," Blackwood admitted. "I keep thinking of things I want to tell her, updates on the treaty, success stories from the integrated villages, how wrong we all were." "I think she knows," Lucian said. "Wherever she is, I think she knows." "You really cared for her, didn't you? Even after everything?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. "I cared for what she represented. The possibility that enemies could see past their hatred to recognize shared humanity. Or in my case, the memory of humanity." He smiled sadly. "And yes, I cared for her. In another life, we might have been happy," Blackwood finished. "I read her journals, all of them. She wrote about you more than she probably should have, about the conflict between duty and doubt, about dreams of different circumstances. I had similar dreams. I know." "She wrote about that too, about the night she died, about what you told her." Blackwood turned to face him fully. "Thank you for giving her that, for sitting with her, for making sure she didn't die alone and afraid. It was the least I could do, and perhaps the most important thing I've ever done." The sun was setting, painting the stained glass in colors of amber and rose. Lucian needed to leave before full dark. He had a meeting with representatives from 3 other vampire kingdoms who were interested in implementing similar treaties. "Before you go," Blackwood said, "there's something you should see." She led him to a side chapel, smaller and more intimate. On the wall was a mural, newly painted. A vampire and a hunter sitting together, hands clasped, as dawn breaks around them. Lucian's breath caught. "When did you—" "The artist is a young woman from one of the integrated villages. Her mother is human, her father a vampire. She grew up hearing stories about the night that changed everything." Blackwood smiled. She wanted to commemorate it, to remind people that peace began with 2 enemies choosing to see each other's humanity. Lucian stared at the mural, his throat tight. The artist had captured something essential, not just the physical act of 2 figures sitting together, but the emotional weight of that moment, the vulnerability, the grief, the hope. "It's perfect," he said hoarsely. "She wants to do more. A whole series depicting the history of the conflict and the path to peace. She's calling it the Thorn Cycle." Alara would have made a terrible face at that name. "Yes, she would have," Blackwood laughed, "and it was genuine. But she'd also be proud, proud of what we've built, proud that her death wasn't meaningless." Lucian nodded, still staring at the mural. In the painting, dawnlight illuminated both figures, vampire and hunter, enemy and friend, divided by history but united in hope. "I promised her I would build a better world," he said quietly. "I'm glad I haven't failed her." "You haven't," Blackwood assured him. "None of us have. We still have work to do, generations of it probably, but we're on the right path. Because of her, because of you, because two warriors were brave enough to set down their weapons and talk." As Lucian left the chapel, the journal Blackwood had given him 2 years ago was tucked in his coat. He carried it everywhere, a reminder of purpose and promise. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he would read Alara's words and remember that single night, the longest and most important night of his very long life. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but changing nonetheless. And somewhere, he hoped, Alara Thorne was watching and approving of what they had built on the foundation of her sacrifice. In the end, she had asked only to have her hand held until sunrise. But in those 6 hours, in that honest conversation between enemies, something had shifted. A seed had been planted in blood-soaked ground, and against all odds, it had grown into something beautiful. 1 year after the treaty signing, Dawn's hope had grown from 30 families to nearly 200. The settlement was no longer a ruin, but a thriving community with markets, schools, workshops, and homes where humans and vampires lived as neighbors. More importantly, it had inspired 5 other settlements to follow its example. The experiment had become a movement. But success came with a price. The old Hunters' Council, cornered by investigations into their corruption, attempted one final play for power. They declared Commander Blackwood a traitor and sent an assassination squad to kill her. They failed. Dimitri, who had been coordinating with Blackwood on security matters, intercepted intelligence about the plot and warned her in time. The assassins were captured by joint patrols, humans and vampires working together to protect one of their leaders. The trial was the most public event since the treaty signing. Representatives from all 6 integrated settlements attended, along with delegations from vampire territories and human cities. The accused sat in chains while evidence of the council's crimes was presented, not just the assassination attempt, but years of embezzlement, murder, and deliberate war profiteering.